Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. Now, I've been waiting a very long time to make this video. Not entirely sure why. I think it's because it's a very complicated issue. I had similar reservations before I started covering Bitcoin mining stocks back in November of 2020. I had been invested in it for quite some time, but unsure about whether or not I should start talking about it publicly. But once I saw that this transition, this sort of awakening was nearly imminent, I just had to get out there and start talking about it. And I feel the same way about Ethereum right now. I've been invested in it for a long time, and over the same time frame, it certainly has exploded. This time last year, Ethereum was trading for merely $350. Today, we're trading at nearly 8 or 9 times that. So those are some incredible returns, and it might lead some to believe that perhaps they've missed out on the opportunity. And to some degree, of course, that's correct. But I still believe that people have a very hard time measuring or understanding what the potential is here. And also, I think Ethereum is one of the least understood of all the blockchain projects out there. And I don't just mean on a technical level. I mean in terms of the value perspective or the economics or even the game theory. People will draw comparisons to, say, Cardano or Solana or Chainlink, or list any number of other smart contract protocols. Many will make the claim that one of those smart contract platforms are faster or smarter or cheaper, anything that they would use to suggest that Ethereum's time on top is limited. I don't think that's the case, and it's not something that I can explain in one simple video. This is a complicated subject, and if you've been wondering whether or not Ethereum has that secret sauce, then stick around, because I'm going to be digging into this more and more over the coming weeks and months, because we are entering another period where the winds are about to change. I've been spending a great deal of my time trying to understand the game theory behind what's about to happen, because I don't think people are quite prepared for what's about to happen next. Ethereum is about to transition from proof of work to proof of stake. And now I know I've only been talking for a short period of time in this video, and I've already mentioned a lot of terms that some people may not fully understand. These are the things that I'm going to be diving into more and more in the coming weeks. But for now, what you need to understand is when the era of proof of work ends for Ethereum, this is going to lead to a resurgence of the narrative of proof of work and mining and energy consumption and ESG. This is going to come right back into the limelight again. Not like it hasn't really truly left, but most of what needed to be said had been said. And in lieu of there being a viable alternative, most people sort of dropped the issue. But you may not be aware that Ethereum will end mining in early 2022. We're just talking only a few months from now. And I know a lot of people will dismiss this because over and over again, Ethereum has delayed this transition. And many, even experts in the space, will declare that this time is no different. Well, I'm speaking to you as someone who both mines with an Ethereum mining rig and runs a staking node on the Ethereum beacon chain. And I can say with near certainty that this time the transition will proceed as planned. This transition is referred to as the merge. This is when proof of stake will replace the consensus algorithm within Ethereum from proof of work to proof of stake, effectively ending mining on Ethereum. This will drastically reduce the energy consumption associated with validating transactions and executing smart contracts. And for all of those institutions that are out there that have been grappling with this issue, Kevin O'Leary has made it clear that all the institutions that he deals with, that he talks with, have a very hard time digesting this.
When you meet an ESG committee, okay, that's sitting on top of the investment committee of any institution, and they even have ethics committees now because they don't want to invest in places where human rights are abused. There's all kinds of these filters coming in. You can have a discussion about how many fairies dance on the head of a pin with an ESG committee, but it doesn't matter if they don't agree. And so what they want to know is, are hydrocarbons being burnt in the creation of the energy used to get a coin awarded? All right? Mm-hmm. Yes or no. Mm-hmm. Binary. Yes or no. And you can't give them the theory about how it's good that there's more efficiency being built into the models for miners and their stacks and efficiencies and all that stuff. They don't give a shit. What they want to know, are you burning any hydrocarbons? If your answer is, oh, well, sort of, kind of, sort of, they just can't invest.
And I want to make it perfectly clear that I don't agree with that assessment. But as I mentioned before, this isn't about my own personal viewpoints. I'm looking at where the winds are blowing and understanding human nature and game theory. This is what's going to decide the direction of that narrative. And it is going to get ugly. The Bitcoin maximalists have made it abundantly clear that they do not like Ethereum. Ever since its creation, they've referred to it as a scam, completely dismissing any value that it provides. Now, you can choose to do the same and stick with Bitcoin. And you know what? You'd be totally fine. In fact, Bitcoin, in my opinion, is the safer investment. Ethereum is more like an early experiment. It's not even feature complete yet. Now, neither is Bitcoin necessarily, but as far as its underlying base layer is concerned, it is. Any changes from here on out will be incremental and slow by design. It's important that it doesn't fundamentally alter its existing architecture because it already works. But Ethereum is far from complete. It would be a whole lot more like investing in Bitcoin, say in 2013 or 2014, simply because at that time in Bitcoin's cycle, people still didn't know what it was trying to be. Was it digital cash? Was it meant for simply a peer-to-peer payment system or payment network? It went through all of those growing pains trying to identify what it was. So investing in it during that time was riskier because when you can't define what something is, you can't forecast what it could be or the size of its addressable market. But on that note, when I'm thinking of Ethereum and its addressable market, it's helpful to start to look at where we are today. Currently, Ethereum's market cap sits at about $352 billion. Now, that is quite substantial. That's actually not far off the peak that Bitcoin reached back in 2017. But if you want to try to get some perspective on this, simply compare it to the market caps of all, say, US publicly traded companies. This is a list of rankings of all the publicly traded US companies and their market caps. If Ethereum were a company, it would find itself just above Home Depot in 15th place. Home Depot. Now, I'm not trying to bash on Home Depot, but as far as future perspective, future potential, in terms of addressable market, where would you put Ethereum in relation to Home Depot? Certainly one is going to be less volatile. I feel a whole lot better holding something like Ethereum as the world transitions into this new era that we're witnessing unfold right before our eyes. Coincidentally, we're falling directly behind Bank of America currently. One single US bank. This is truly remarkable to me. But also to understand what its potential is, you also need to be able to at least define what it is. So to define exactly what Ethereum is, I'm just going to let Vitalik Buterin do that himself.
In the simplest terms, what is Ethereum and how is it different from Bitcoin? So Bitcoin is a blockchain that's designed for one application, right? Which is like maintaining and letting people use Bitcoin, the currency. Ethereum is a general purpose blockchain. So instead of being a blockchain that's designed for one application, Ethereum is a blockchain that supports a built-in programming language, and whatever blockchain application you want to build, you can just write the logic of that application in the programming language, upload that program to the chain, and this becomes what we call a smart contract. And anyone can then interact with your application, and the blockchain interprets the rules of your application for you. So instead of being something that's designed to do one thing, it's designed to open up space for creativity to like basically let people do whatever thing that they want to do on top of it.
Ethereum is a general purpose blockchain, a general purpose programmable blockchain, the first of its kind. And this is why I find it unfortunate and somewhat disappointing when I find so many people claiming Ethereum is better than Bitcoin, or Bitcoin is better than Ethereum, or Ethereum is a scam even. The two are not even competing with one another. Oftentimes, even those supporters of Ethereum will often make the claim that Ethereum can do everything that Bitcoin can do and more. And that is simply a false narrative. Ethereum and Bitcoin share many of the same properties, but Bitcoin takes the cake when it comes to immutability and censorship resistance, not to mention decentralization. These are all very important pillars of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. There are 5 main principles, 5 main pillars that sort of distinguish this technology from the traditional centralized model that we've become accustomed to our entire lives. That is, that they be borderless, that they be censorship resistant, that they be decentralized, permissionless, and immutable. Now, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time diving into each one of those principles, just to highlight that's what's important here. Many of the other blockchains exhibit all of these principles to a certain degree, but it's not binary. It's not yes or no or on and off. These are moving targets. These are aspirations. I mean, even Bitcoin at some point in its life was certainly not decentralized. When the first block was mined, or technically the second block, the first block, little known fact, actually wasn't mined, but I'll save that for a different video. But the point is, at the beginning, there was only one miner. There was only one node, Satoshi. That's not decentralized. Shortly after that, there were 2. I mean, that's twice as decentralized, but the point is it took time for it to acquire that property, and it's still changing today. This is a perfect illustration of that fact. This is a historical illustration of the mining pools on the Bitcoin network. In the beginning, it was just one pool, a bunch of unknown miners. We have no way of knowing really how many of them there were, but they were all solo mining. And let's face it, very few of them. It wasn't until Bitcoin mining became a business model that we started seeing more and more decentralization in the mining pools. And as time has gone on, Bitcoin mining decentralization has only grown. So what is it to be decentralized? At what point in this history did Bitcoin suddenly become decentralized? That's a very difficult thing to answer, especially now that you have a benchmark like Bitcoin to compare it to. Prior to Bitcoin, there wasn't many things we could even draw that comparison to. So I'm highlighting this to make the point that you will also hear people say Ethereum is not decentralized. Yes, it is. Maybe not as decentralized as Bitcoin, but certainly compared to traditional financial institutions, it is very decentralized. And I would argue certainly decentralized enough to accomplish its purpose. And over time will only grow in that decentralization. So by now you're probably wondering, okay, so if Ethereum has all this potential, what are we really talking about here?
You want to talk turkey? Let's talk turkey. How much money?
I mean, what would be a reasonable price target, say, over the next year or two? I'm going to go out on a limb here and put in a theoretical price target for the end of 2022, because I think 2022 is going to be the defining year for Ethereum in particular. Bitcoin is going to have a great year as well, but I do think Ethereum will most likely outperform Bitcoin in the coming year. You may not agree with me, but hear me out. As I pointed out earlier, when looking at the market cap of all these different companies, Ethereum falls quite low on this list if it were a company. And I would argue that certainly Ethereum could surpass every single one of these publicly traded companies just based on its addressable market. One of the things I think that's holding Ethereum back currently is the transaction fees. Ethereum is at capacity right now. That is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of strength. What it means is, without further scaling solutions, Ethereum has reached maximum supply. Demand is being held down due to the fact that the blocks are only so big. Only so much data can be included. So my entire thesis around Ethereum comes down to the addressable market. And in my opinion, the addressable market of Ethereum far surpasses the addressable market of any of these individual publicly traded companies. So yes, I do believe Ethereum's market cap will surpass the market cap of Apple by the end of 2022. As a matter of fact, I'm of the opinion that Ethereum will most likely surpass the combined market cap of all the FANG stocks. But I don't necessarily think that's going to happen by the end of next year. It's theoretically possible, but I'm not about to sit here and proclaim that from the rooftops. But certainly surpassing the market cap of Apple, which currently sits at 2.339 trillion. If Ethereum could surpass the current market capitalization of Apple, that would bring the value of each coin to nearly $20,000. A convenient target considering how that was the same value that Bitcoin reached in its last market cycle. But it's important to realize that Ethereum doesn't operate the same way as Bitcoin. And even Bitcoin doesn't operate the same way as Bitcoin used to. In a recent interview on What Bitcoin Did, Willy Woo actually made this case that the Bitcoin cycles are most likely over.
This cycle is not a cycle in my reckoning. Like, oh, this cycle is different. I'm like, it's not even a cycle.
I mean, it's pretty obvious by now that the cycles that we've grown accustomed to in this space, they just aren't playing out the way they used to. I mean, that really shouldn't be that much of a surprise, but it also makes sense fundamentally when you consider the driving forces behind those cycles in the first place. The mechanics of Bitcoin mining are very different now from what they used to be. The whole point was that after a halving event, the amount of new Bitcoin supplied to the market would drop, which would reduce the amount of selling pressure that we'd be exposed to. As of now, as we all know, the growing number of publicly traded Bitcoin miners that never existed before don't sell their Bitcoin. So the effect of halving cycles is nearly irrelevant now, because the actual effect has actually been diminished to near zero as miners don't want to sell. And Ethereum doesn't have any of those metrics. So as you can see, I'm already diving in and setting up a lot of these topics that I need to discuss in much greater detail. And I really look forward to doing that. But I don't want to overwhelm people. I simply wanted to get started on this. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I've been racking my brain on how to initiate this, how to just start, until I realized I just need to do it. Because I think that this story is not being told. Certainly not adequately. And there's too much noise out there for people to really get a good grasp on what all of this means. And it's going to get a lot worse. I suspect I myself, as time goes on, as I continue to do this, am going to be attacked down in the comment section below. There's going to be a lot of hate thrown around out there. People are going to feel threatened. Institutions are going to muddy the waters. But part of that thesis of mine is that institutions will back Ethereum. They're not in it at this point. It is still highly experimental. Those gains, the gains that early adopters are awarded with, are as a result of taking that risk, betting that it will be successful. The people who adopted Bitcoin back in 2014 did so at great risk. There was no guarantees that this experiment was going to work. That's why, generally speaking, most institutions weren't going to touch that. But now that they're interested, but still struggling with this environmental component of it, Ethereum is going to look extremely attractive once they've been able to identify that this transition was successful. So anyone that thinks that this transition, this merge, is priced in is sorely mistaken for multiple reasons. Not just that institutions are going to come in. It's also the fact that many people don't even believe that this is actually going to take place. I'll do another video explaining exactly why I think that this time the merge will happen as planned. And since I am going to be doing a whole lot more of these videos, if there's something about Ethereum or this space in general that you're not sure about, or any questions that you have, put it down in the comments and I'll try to address that in future videos. And I'm not going to be abandoning the Bitcoin mining content as well. I think that it's still very important and there's a whole lot of developments coming. But the fact is, the existing content that I have on the channel covers most of really what I wanted to address. And I thought it was important to share with my audience the things that I'm looking forward to, the things that I'm anticipating. And right now, for me, that potential lies within Ethereum. So let me know what you think. Are you excited as I am? Do you hate this already? Let me know down in the comments. That's all for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.